Hey, everybody, welcome back to Lettermen Row. I am Austin Ward. That's Jeremy Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. This is the practice report brought to you by Byers Auto. Buckeyes just about done now. 1 day left. I've got those workouts in the bank. The wide receivers talked with the media on Thursday morning. Spring game is Saturday at noon. We'll have plenty of coverage of that and some bold predictions up on the site on Friday morning. But let's dive into what we've learned about one of the deepest, most talented groups in the entire country, not just on the Ohio State roster. That Zone 6 group, Brian Hartline has recruited at a high level. He's developed at a high level. He got a bonus with Chris Olave returning. What's the most important takeaway from those wide receivers that you had on Thursday, Berm?
Most important one to me is that people should stop assuming things when they don't entirely know things, because as we've said in multiple practice reports and other areas, we don't get to see a lot of things that are going on inside the Ohio State program right now. And in the brief snippets of time we get to watch things, assumptions get made that are sometimes inaccurate and don't necessarily need to be like.
Well, say which one it is, Berm. Say which one.
Because this idea earlier this week, people are saying that Julian Fleming is a third-team receiver at Ohio State, and it's just not true. He's been hurt. He had a major offseason surgery that hasn't been discussed, and it doesn't need to be discussed. It's his personal business. It's his, he's working back through it. He's obviously practicing a little bit, but I think it was important. And clearly Brian Hartline thought it was important because he didn't mince words really when he talked about it. And people need to stop spreading narratives that they don't really know about. And, on the field, without question, this is the most talented position group in the entire country in one place.
I think that it is important to put this in context. When we talk about going to some open practices, having 6 viewing periods, there have been 3 days of that where the media has been invited in. When guys are limited, sometimes they're able to get some reps when there's non-contact individual periods. So, for instance, on Monday, Julian Fleming got his, but they were with the third-team offense because he's not able to participate fully as he recovers from that shoulder injury and shoulder surgery. It goes back to his high school career. It's been a long-term deal, finally an opportunity to get it cleaned up. So, if you get an opportunity to participate, Ohio State gives you that. Those aren't the ones where you make an assessment about who would be where on the depth chart because it wasn't a live period. So it does inform some things, like looking at Josh Fryer, who we've talked about. The offensive line is not fully healthy, but that's still informative about where he might be in that competition, but it is not locked in stone. That is certainly Julian Fleming is not going to be a third-string wide receiver for Ohio State when he's healthy. And to make any assessments based on that on Monday, when in the previous workouts we had known and verified and seen that he wasn't able to go through drills fully because of the shoulder, I just, you and I were both asked about that on Monday. Like, is he hurt? Yes, he's hurt and recovering. He is not getting jumped on the depth chart because of the fact that he had to get his shoulder cleaned up.
And it's not a knock on Marvin Harrison or Emeka Buka or any of the other guys that are running in front of him. I mean, these are obviously very good young players, and it's certainly going to push Julian Fleming when he gets back. But don't assume that decisions are being made right now for what happens in the fall. And that, I guess, is the point.
Yeah, and when you look at Julian Fleming, if this didn't come up and you still ask Brian Hartline about it, I think the main takeaway would be they're really pleased with his development despite the injury. I think this has been a huge spring for him despite the limited reps, despite the surgery and the rehab. He seems to be really coming into his own, and I think a lot of people took some time to commend him for that. He's done a really nice job. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is another guy who they're really excited to get on the field again. And when you look at this room, Julian Fleming is one of the talented guys in this room. And like Berm said, it's one of the most talented units in the country. So when you put all those factors together, none of what was being said about Julian Fleming made a lick of sense. And so it's just kind of strange that we even have to address this, but here we are.
I want to wrap up this little Julian Fleming portion of the program by saying this. When we people who cover recruiting talk about a prospect's ranking, understand what the word prospect means, right? It is a look into the future. And we talked about this last year before, and when Julian Fleming signed his letter of intent at Ohio State, he needed to learn how to play football to be a good wide receiver. He was a extremely talented athlete in his offense in high school at Southern Columbia High School in Catawissa, PA. He was not anywhere near the wide receiver prospect that Jackson Smith-Njigba was coming out of high school. He did not know how to play the position, but the tools are all there. And as Ryan Day talked about Monday, everyone has a different road. And I just think that sometimes the media, and I guess, we'll include ourselves in that, there is a tendency to make really broad brushed assumptions based on very little evidence. And anyway, other than that, I think we learned some important things today.
Well,
right?
yes, I think we definitely do count as being in the media, Berm. But when you talk about that development, I mean, it's not just Julian Fleming. His case is certainly unique because of everything you just described, what he could have gained from a full spring a year ago. We've talked about this with every position group, and it applies to every player. It also applies to Jackson Smith-Njigba. He, was able to make a really sensational catch early on. That highlight will probably be played throughout the rest of his career. But he missed some things, get a little banged up, maybe get sick at some point. Not as many practices. That impacted him. So he talked about that on Thursday morning as well, how much getting through 15 practices means to him as he goes along. Jamison Williams needed them. He was able to make some big-time plays late in the year. But all of these guys, that's maybe the scariest part of what Brian Hartline has when he gets, we've seen the development, the routes, the understanding of football, the competitive level that he brings to that room. If you give that to Garrett Wilson for one more year, Jamison Williams, Jackson Smith-Njigba, the guys who already, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, who already have their black stripes off. We've seen Jaden Balor just in those couple snippets of practice we got to watch make plays and get his hands on the football. A normal year for every position is valuable, but this collection of talent and the coaching staff that's in place, that's really why Chris Olave is back, because he has seen what that can do for him. And he also missed out on that. He was already pretty darn good in the first place, but it's really scary what Ohio State can do at that position right now.
I'm glad you asked him, because I was waiting to ask Chris when he said today that he came back because he wanted to be a NFL ready guy day one. And you were going to be a first round pick. You were the best, one of the 2 or 3 best receivers in college football. You're a team leader. You're one of the best special teams players in the country. What else do you have to do? And then at the very end of our media availability with receivers today, I think the truth finally came out. Chris Olave does not like to leave when things end on a sour note. I mean, that kid, he could have gone pro 2 years ago and didn't. After the Clemson loss, he could have gone pro after the Alabama loss. He was, I'm not doing it. That taste in his mouth is something he wants to wipe out. And, I think it's fascinating insight into these young guys that Brian Hartline has in his room, because they all know that they can get better. And I asked Garrett Wilson about it, but Garrett Wilson to me is like the prime example of a kid who doesn't really have any idea how good he can be at football, because he's always kind of only played one day a week. He shows up on Saturday and dominates, and it's easy. But once he's able to start finding the practice habits and doing all the consistent things that make him a great player down the road. I mean, as you said, these guys are just scratching the surface.
I think one of the biggest things for these wide receivers, and I'll go back to what the point Austin was making, is it all goes back to trust, I think, within the wide receiver room, because, you got to earn the trust of Brian Hartline. You got to earn the trust of Brian Day. Then you got to earn the trust of the quarterback. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave obviously had that, and that's why they were able to, they're ultra talented, but that's also why they were able to have such a great impact last year. You saw Jamison Williams get more targets as the season went on. You saw Julian Fleming late in the season get a couple targets because I think Justin Fields learned to trust him. I think as these guys go through a full spring together, and these sophomores even go through their first full spring in the program, you'll see that level of trust with all these wide receivers grow. And that's when, this room can become even more dangerous, when all these guys are on the same page, when they've all had a full spring together, when they've all been able to mesh together for so long, because you just didn't have that last spring. When you put all these guys in the same room and you get them that level of trust with the quarterbacks and the coaching staff, that's when the room is really going to take off. And I think that's even scarier for me to say, because I don't know how the room could take off even more than it already was. And here we are getting ready to see it Saturday and then into the fall.
You're spot on. Spot on. Look at the NCAA with the new rule that was passed on Wednesday with the one-time transfer. Those conversations of trust and understanding your role and Brian Hartline's willingness and ability to manage egos, playing time, expectations are going to be very important, because when you're recruiting at a level like Brian Hartline is, it is going to be very easy for other schools around the country to say, oh, well, here's Julian Fleming. He's just sitting there not playing football. Well, he should come play for us. And there's going to be a lot of that outside noise that happens. And so what you're saying is spot on. Like, that trust has to be 100% for these kids to know that the path of theirs, whatever path it is better with Brian Hartline.
I don't think Chris Olave could have left after that Fiesta Bowl berm. I think he
could have just walked away. I'm saying,
but no. The point,
he could have.
I was going to say, the point is, we were having this conversation last off season about how he went 3 days, 4 days without being able to eat solid food, and that route, and how it motivated him to go through it. You know, I think that factor is what you're talking about, how it influences him, is that he could
have opted out last year, is what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. I got you. I didn't know which route you were taking there, but we also know that there's no chance that Chris Olave, he told us that last year, he wasn't even considering opting out. He was so competitive. He talked about one of the reasons he came back was because he wanted to compete against Garrett Wilson and Jamison Williams in the offseason program. I mean, this is a guy that is as driven as you'll find. We talked to Terry McLaurin about him a couple of weeks ago. I think there's another element that he loves, the fact that seniors get to have a huge influence over the room, and he might put on that block O this fall. We'll see. He's one of the best embodiments of what Ohio State does right now. Heading into that spring game, they're going to get the football a lot. Who's going to have the best receiving performance out of these guys on Saturday?
I'll let Berm go first.
Why?
Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to, because he's going to be on the field the most of the guys we talked to today. And I thought, if we're talking real football and insight that was gleaned from today, it's that Garrett Wilson is moving back outside in the Ohio State offense to line up opposite Chris Olave, which means that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be used a lot more in that slot receiver situation. And with Ohio State's tight end uncertainty, because you don't know exactly how much 12 personnel they're going to run this year with losing Luke Farrell, it's a real opportunity for Jackson Smith-Njigba to have a ton of impact in the Ohio State offense.
Here's what's most interesting about that to me, if we're going to talk about Monday's open viewing period, is that Garrett Wilson was still lined up in the slot, at least during one specific drill at one time, right next to Chris Olave. And so Garrett Wilson kind of alluded to this. He has the ability to line up anywhere. And I don't think Ohio State is going to marry itself to Garrett Wilson. You only have to play X. You only have to play opposite of Chris Olave. Whatever matchup they can find for Garrett Wilson, they will.
But that's because they have so many receivers that can play all over the place. And they're going to be rotating 6 or 7 guys into all 3 of those spots. So I think that we're going to hear, okay, this guy's an X, this guy's a Y, this guy's a Z, but they're all ABC through XYZ.
Yeah, and I just keep thinking back to Chris Olave and how Ohio State used him in the slot when they would send him in motion, and then he would be isolated on the edge and beat Michigan for a touchdown in his sophomore year. And that's what I feel like Garrett Wilson's going to be. You can line up in the slot, but it doesn't really matter because he's going to be all over the field and he's going to catch a lot of passes. As for the spring game, I think it's going to be Emeka Egbuka. I just think that they're going to get those young guys a lot of reps. Those guys need it. And I think, he's just going to have a good performance. I think he's going to catch quite a few balls, maybe get in the end zone a couple times. Just those young guys, I think they're going to want to showcase him. Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting more praise than any player in the entire program right now.
Yeah, it's getting hard to not jump on that hype train at this point. I mean, you really want to be cautious about going overboard with expectations and hyperbole. But have you ever heard, Austin, in the 10 years you've been covering Ohio State, have you ever heard a freshman wide receiver / offensive player get the type of words that he's getting from other players?
No. And the real kicker to it is that a lot of it is unprompted. Sometimes when Torrance Gibson was getting spring hype, it was because people wanted it to be the case, and they would ask specifically about it. Ryan Day did this, I think, 3 weeks ago. He doesn't like to single players out, and he was talking about Marvin Harrison. Man, he showed up as a grown man ready to go. You asked Chris Olave, who's playing well in spring, and he said Marvin Harrison is real. This is about as high of praise as I've heard from any player on either side of the ball. And, I mean, think about all the people we're including in that mix. that you didn't go through spring or August training camps with people talking about Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa or Chase Young this way when they were 5 stars coming in. I mean, and Marvin Harrison, he was he wound up being a little bit overshadowed when you were covering the recruitments of this firm. Like once Emeka Egbuka got in the class, it was like, all right, well, he's going to be the leader of that. Maybe Marvin Harrison took a little bit of that personal.
I mean, I had this conversation with General Carpenter on the Morning Juice on Wednesday, but like, it's kind of ridiculous that we, and I say we, the media, didn't expect the guy who's the son of an NFL Hall of Famer, who's like maybe the best route runner in NFL history, but is 4 inches taller than him and 40 pounds heavier than him, that we didn't expect him to be a really good football player. I mean, it sort of boggles the mind that it's surprising people, because at 6'4", 220 pounds and the son of Marvin freaking Harrison, you'd expect him to know how to play football.
Yeah, I don't really have an argument against that. I don't know why you would bet against the son of a Hall of Famer. The other guy that Chris Olave brought up, and I know he was talking about all 3 of them, but we just haven't really heard a lot from Jaden Balor during this spring, and you just wonder maybe he's the guy that comes out in the spring game and just shows something that we haven't really been talking about, because Emeka Egbuka's gotten a lot of praise, Marvin Harrison's gotten a lot of praise, the sophomores are all getting a lot of attention, and then there's Jaden Balor just kind of hiding back there. You wonder what the chip on his shoulder is looking like right now.
Jaden is probably the most athletic of the 3. So in a spring game sort of environment, he may get an opportunity to really flash, but he's the one that maybe they're counting on to be a little bit, they need to be more consistent. But if you think back to 2014, when Johnny Dixon and Paris Campbell and Curtis Samuel all came in together, they all roomed together. Emeka, Marvin, and Jaden all are roommates with Kyle McCord. Like, they're all very similar personalities. They just go about their business, and think that kind of just rubs off, and you start to pick up, hey, these guys are doing this and this, and now I need to do that. And for Jaden, who at times in high school, there was a little bit of a aura around him that he maybe wasn't consistent, or that he didn't always handle himself maturely, being around those 2 dudes may be helping him learn what it takes to be that guy a lot faster.
Well, if we're talking about people that are going to maybe steal the show on Saturday, Berm, I don't know what you saw on that one Friday that you were there without me, but the last 2 practices that I went to, Marvin Harrison had at least 3 touchdowns in the red zone drills. I'm going to guess that he probably caught some balls when you were there. Maybe that window was a little bit shorter. I won't put you on the spot there, but he has had his name called over that loudspeaker on the microphone more than anybody short of Garrett Wilson. Just from the time that I've been in there, I would bet on Saturday that you're going to see a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll be watching. Can't wait to be back there in the horseshoe. Yeah, bro.
We can't be done yet. I'm sorry, because I know we were talking to wide receivers today, but we also got our first introduction to Parker Fleming today. And I'm going to ask you, Austin, like, remember when we talked to Jeff Hafley the first time, or when we talked to Matt Barnes the first time, you're like, wow, that dude is actually smart as a whip. Parker Fleming is impressive.
Yeah, he, I don't want to keep beating this into the ground, but I remember the first time that Ryan Day spoke, and the way that he described, the game of football is complex. And even those of us who cover it and have covered it for a long time will never understand it the same way that these guys do. But it helps to have people who are able to communicate it. And they have to be able to do that for players, people who are learning the game, and then to convey it in a setting where we might feel like we understand it. It's a rare trait. And I think that I don't want to say that it's the same thing as sitting in their position room, but if you can help anybody understand it, that goes a long way as an instructor, a teacher, a coach. And he's got the same ability to communicate just off of one press conference, which is not a big deal, although he's been at Ohio State dating back to 2012 in some form or fashion, off and on. Not like he's hasn't earned his stripes along the way, but listening to a Ryan Day, a Jeff Hafley, Matt Barnes, and now Parker Fleming, these guys are incredibly smart, but it's not just about having the football knowledge, it's the ability to share it with others. And whether you're watching that press conference on Lettermen Row on YouTube or taking part of it, I'm blown away by that. And I think that's why Ryan Day, he has talked about this dating back to January. Why did he make this move? Well, these guys are really smart. He loves Matt Barnes and he loves Parker Fleming, and they're on this same wavelength of the way that they want to teach and coach the game. So you notice that right away. that's a part of the job, is talking to us, but at a small one. But that's basically, I've seen this enough when I've been allowed to go into some of these position rooms. That same ability to communicate, if you can do it that well publicly, imagine what you can do privately when you build those relationships and that door gets closed. I think that's a big deal, and you picked up on that, Berm.
Yeah, I mean, you have to teach. Football's about teaching, and especially for special teams, you're talking about getting kids who have been superstars in high school and probably never had to play special teams and never had to do the dirty work on the football field, and to be able to show them why that's important, and to be able to really dive in with them into the details and the muck of football. You have to be able to promote that in a way that it excites people rather than makes them think it's a punishment. I mean, I remember when I played youth football, I mean, it was like, oh crap, I have to be on special teams. It's like it was the right field of football. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like you wanted that, but Ohio State has found a way to turn special teams into sort of, the cool thing to do in their football program. And it's because people like Parker Fleming, who learned it from Urban Meyer, that special teams is really damned important.
Yeah, as somebody who used to have to get geared up to play right field, I can attest to what Berm's saying with the special teams thing. But I think Parker Fleming just kind of puts it in this way that he did kind of remind me of, like, the first time you talk to Jeff Hafley, you just walk out of there and you're like, okay, wow, Ohio State's got something here. And this guy has a chance to, be a star when he really gets going. I kind of got the same thing from Parker Fleming. He just seems like a guy that, makes everything easy to understand, but also, is just easy to talk to, easy to get along with. He can relate to a lot of the players. He's not an older guy. You just walk away pretty impressed. And then, a lot of the fan base was a little agitated when Ryan Day's not going out and making these splash hires. All of a sudden you talk to Parker Fleming and you're like, maybe this Day guy knows what he's doing when it comes to coaching hires.
We saw a number of Ohio State players on Twitter after Parker was promoted that were like, oh, this dude is one of the best coaches we've ever had. I have football nerds who are friends who were watching the press conference today, and I received 3 separate text messages from people who'd never seen Parker Fleming or heard him talk, say, wow, this dude is really sharp. It just automatically, you can see it. And I think that hopefully people out there who had those question marks heading into this offseason felt a little bit sated today.
He also wasn't shy about telling Berm how wrong he was about the death of special teams.
Right, exactly. And I like that. I like to be put in my place. He knew what I was saying. Though.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying also.
If you would have just said that the kickoff is dying, he was probably on board with that.
Yeah, but I wanted to know how he's enhancing the room. Despite the fact that we're losing the focus, we're leaving the track, and that is when it's time to wrap up the practice report by Byers Auto.
Well, I was about to do that before, but I just needed your approval to do it now.
But I had to talk about Parker Fleming. We had to talk about it.
Well, we could have done 15 minutes on Parker Fleming. We should have just done a whole nother special teams episode. Instead, we'll lump them together because this is the practice report. It's brought to you by Byers Auto. It doesn't come with a script, and we never know where it's going to start or where it's going to end. That's Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. I'm Austin Ward. Stay with us for full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes all year at lettermenrow.com.